than me sucking. Hey everyone, I'm gonna give everybody just a second to hop on, and then we'll get started. Go ahead and share my screen, get our first document pulled up. Today, in our contracts class, we are going to discuss every document you need to get a buyer's agent under contract. So obviously, we all know it's been a hot topic with everything that's going on with the NAR. And we've talked a lot about exclusive buyer's agreements, and I'm going to go through those today also. But I also wanted to go through a couple more documents that we really should all get signed at the same time. One being the consumer, a guide to agencies relationship. Sorry, I still call it a consumer guide because that's what it was when I first got licensed, as well as the agency consent buyer. There's a couple of key things that have been came up a couple times in the last week, so I thought this would be a really good class to kind of go over and just make sure everybody knows these forms and knows how to fill them out and what to put where, most importantly, on them. So without any further ado, let me make sure I got everybody in. Yep, I'm going to go ahead and get started. First one is, this is the guide to agency relationships. Now, this should look very familiar to you. Make sure I am sharing my screen. Yes. So this is a KREC. That's the Kentucky Real Estate Commission regulated document, which means we have to use this document for everything. We can't use substitute documents, anything like that. Anytime the state requires a document and puts it in the statutes, you have to use that, long story short. So what is this document? Well, first and foremost, this is the document that you should get signed upon the second time talking with anybody, or at the point that they enter into client-related conversations. Now, I want to be really clear. This document does not mean that they are a client. As a matter of fact, the very first top line at the very top says, this is not a, let me see if I can zoom in on this a little bit. There we go. This is not a contract. This is the Kentucky Real Estate Commission, the Guide to Agencies Relationship. This brokerage company is required by law to ask you to sign this guide as a way to acknowledge that you have received it. Your signature below will not obligate you to work with this brokerage company. A couple things. Number one, it clearly states that you don't have to work with the person to get them to sign it. However, you do need to sign it in order to make sure that you're compliant with state laws. Second thing is, because this doesn't mean that if me and you sign this together that we are necessarily working together, this is the first document that I would recommend you get signed, either at a wants and needs, or at if somebody attends your open house, and you obviously have to get all the documents signed these days to represent somebody that walks in the door. This is a great way to build a relationship because it's non-contractual. It allows you to enter into conversations with the person while still not necessarily them being a client of yours, meaning you haven't had a signed agreement. And what I found just in my personal experience is the more documents you get signed, the more comfortable people get with you, and the more likely that they would be willing to enter into a business relationship with you, if you will. So first thing about this is a couple things, and I do, again, I'm not going to read this document word for word. I'm going to go over some key parts. One of these things in contracts classes that I recommend for everybody is please print this out, and then also highlight anything that you have questions on. Take a picture of it and shoot it to me. If you don't understand something, let me know. I'll go over through the gist of it, but this will be really great, is because one of the things that I tell people all the time is, when it comes to contracts, we need to know what we are asking people to sign it. And if you can't articulate exactly what a certain document means, then you're probably not going to be able to get it signed. Also, knowing that our clients might not fully read, even though we should encourage them to fully read everything, they are relying on our interpretation of the document. So the better you understand the document, the better you can represent your client, and then also keep yourself from getting out of trouble. So first and foremost, what this not first paragraph, but the second paragraph, first paragraph you have to fill things in, is it talks about the different types of licenses. You can be a licensed agent, you can be a broker, you can be a sales associate affiliated with a principal brokerage. So the very first line is the name of the principal broker. For all of us, we know the answer to that one, right? It's Kelly Ann Harris. So Kelly Ann Harris goes inside of here. Then the next one is the name of the brokerage. So here is where you're going to put Keller Williams Elite or Keller Williams Heartland. And then the last one is your phone number. Not your phone number, the brokerage phone number. So who's our broker? Top line, Kelly Ann Harris. What's our brokerage name? Keller Williams Elite or Keller Williams Heartland. And then what's the phone number to the brokerage? So you can just plug all three of those things in. It goes on to say what a relationship looks like. So you can see here that you can contact the principal broker should you need any assistance beyond what the agent can do, things like that, and that you have no fiduciary obligations because they're not a client. Is basically the summary of that paragraph. Again, it re-emphasizes that this is not in a contract or an agreement for services, but more of a guide of what it's like to work with a real estate agent in different capacities. The next paragraph is where you're actually going to be named for the first time as who's talking to this particular client. So you can see, carefully read about the available agency relationships below and ask the license to provide this guide. And then here's where you're going to put your name. So if it's me, I'm putting Matt Brown in here. Now, here's the key. You do not put your team name. You do not put your Rainmaker's name. You put, as a licensed agent, you put your license name right here. That way it's very clear that I'm the one that presented this to you. I'm the one that talked to you about it, things along those lines. It goes on to say that that they do not relieve the seller, buyer, lessor, or lessee of the duty and responsibility to protect their own interest. You are advised to carefully read all agreements and ensure that they adequately express the understanding of the transaction. So again, this helps you, right? This tells them, hey, you need to read all of your documents. It even goes on to say, if you need legal or tax advice, you consult the appropriate professional. So again, we don't ever want to represent ourselves as lawyers. We don't want to represent ourselves as accountants. While we may know a little bit about it because we've done this for a while, and if you're just starting out, you will learn about it. It's always best you can give your opinion, but then refer them to the appropriate professional for the official answer. So then it goes into, well, how do you work with a real estate agent? So there's single agency. That means that I'm working directly with you, and the other party, if there is other party at this point, is represented by a different person at a different brokerage. That's single agency. I'm representing you as a single person, basically. So this is for like our individual agents, for example. Dual agency is, as you all know, is where you simultaneously act as a representative for two different parties that are entering into an agreement together. So we might represent a buyer and a seller at the same time. And it says that in this paragraph. Designated agency, we don't use it. Don't talk about it. Just tell them right away. Designated agency, what designated agency is, for those of you that, like me, who it's been a while since you took the classes, that's where the broker basically assigns somebody to represent each individual party. We don't do that. We do allow you in the state of Kentucky and then at our offices to operate as a dual agent, meaning you can represent both parties. Nobody is designated. Then going to page 2, designated agencies, again, kind of the second part of that, transactional brokerage. So this is where you are basically, think of this as like you're handling paperwork. I'm willing to fill out the paperwork that you need, whether it be disclosures, whether it be a purchase agreement, so on and so forth, for obviously compensation. But and here's the key, it says inside that you do not represent either party. Okay, so you do owe the parties duties of good faith and fair dealings, but you cannot relay confidential information between the parties. You are not allowed to disclose that in any way, shape, or form, no matter what type of agency it is. An unrepresented party is somebody who just refuses to work with you, not refuse, just isn't working with you at this point. That means that they are not a customer, but they are a prospect. And it says here, an unrepresented party is not a client or prospective client. An unrepresented party to a transaction takes steps necessary to protect your best interests. And then there's real estate teams. And I think you all know what real estate teams are. But that's where, groups of people come together and operate underneath the umbrella of one Rainmaker. So that'll apply to a lot of you all. So individual agents, again, single agency, real estate teams, it's real estate teams. All I say on this part is, hey, I have a real estate team. There's a chance that one of my teammates might need to cover for me should I be out. But we all operate underneath the same person and the same principal broker. Confidential information, of course, you can read through that, but just remember, you do have a fiduciary obligation to confidentiality, which means you can't disclose anything that is not public information or that would put the other party at a disadvantage, or the party that you're representing at a disadvantage, I should say. Cooperation, of course, I do expect this part to change as with the NAR, but as of now, it has not changed. And it says the brokerage company may, during the course of transaction, share fees or compensation with another brokerage company. This typically occurs when the listing brokerage company shares commission with another brokerage representing a buyer for specific property. Again, we have to use this form. I know it's changed. And I expect them to revise this form. However, they haven't done it. So at this point is probably when you're going to want to talk about the NAR and how the commission has been decoupled and separated out. So seller commission, buyer commission, you all know that whole spell. And then finally, and last but not least, is the fair housing. And of course, that just simply says that, basically if a seller puts their house up for sale, they're willing to list the house for whoever can afford to buy the house, regardless of and this applies to leases and everything, but it's regardless of race, color, religion, sex, family status, disability, national origin, sexual orientation, and that is county to county thing, but I just mentioned it, or gender identity, or to discriminate in advertising the sale or rental of housing, the finance of housing, and providing real estate brokerage services. So basically, hey, we're not going to discriminate in any way. We're willing to work with anybody and everybody in order to help you buy a house or in order to help you get your house sold. And then, of course, all parties, keep in mind if you're representing two people, both parties need to sign and then date and time this page. So quick recap on the first page is all you're going to fill out. Kelly Ann Harris top line, Keller Williams Elite second line, phone number to your brokerage in the third line. Of course, second line can say Heartland if you're a Heartland agent. Name of your license here, and then the consumer signs at the bottom of the second page. So any questions on that form? I know y'all filled them out before, but any questions real quick before I move on to the next one? All right, let me close this one. Next form, and this is the one that I've gotten a couple of questions about. So let me pull this up, zoom in for you a little bit. Go. Okay, so first and foremost, this is agency consent. There are two different of these forms. This is the buyer one, there is a seller one. For the buyer one, very simply, if you're representing somebody, they're going to be your client, they're your customer, then you're going to put both parties' names here, one party if it's one, two parties, three parties, whatever it is, all buyers' names go in this top line. The second part is if there is a property address that they are directly going after at this point, then you would put that in. If obviously you're just now starting to work with somebody and you haven't identified a property address, inside there you can put to be determined. Part A, this is what you fill out at that wants and needs. When you first meet, you got your guide to agency relationship that we just filled out. This is the second form that you're going to fill out. You're only going to fill out part A at this time, by the way. So it says to be completed prior to entering a written agreement to provide real estate brokerage services, including but not limited to a buyer representation agreement or completing or directing the completion of a contract, offer, or lease for a real estate transaction. So in any way, shape, or form that you're representing somebody, this needs to be filled out. Part A means you haven't found a property yet. Part B is once you found a property, just to be clear on that. So the first part is, again, something's going to sound repetitive, so I'm going to move a little fast on this. Principal broker being retained, Kelly Ann Harris. The name of the affiliate agent. This is your name. You're the affiliate agent, so you're going to put your name here. I'd put Matt Brown. And this is where you're going to put your office, Keller Williams Elite or Keller Williams Heartland. Then you have to check one of these four boxes. Either A, I'm representing you as a buyer's agent. B, I'm representing you as a dual agent, which means I represent the seller and the buyer. Designated agent doesn't apply, so we're never going to check that box. Or the license shall provide transactional brokerages for the buyers or sellers. So that means that you're basically helping them write a contract, but you're not truly representing either party. So you're going to sign either the first box, the second box, or the third box, depending on your situation. Once you sign that, it just says down here that they have already received the Kentucky Real Estate Commission's Guide to Agency Relationship. That's that first form we just went through. And then everybody's going to sign, print their name, and then put date and time. Once we've gone through that, then we're going to come down to Part B. So Part B is the very next page. Now, I want to stop right here. If you're just doing a wants and needs, this is the first time you sat in front of a client, you don't fill out Part B yet. Part B comes once you actually get a property. They identify a property and they're ready to write an offer. So if we're writing an offer, Part B goes like this: is the buyer or leasee is represented by affiliate agent. Just a reminder, that's you. So you're going to put your name there, and then the name of the brokerage and principal broker's name. This is key. You got to put both on this line. So Keller Williams Elite or Heartland, and then Kelly Ann Harris. And I usually just put Keller Williams Elite / Kelly Ann Harris from there. Then you got to tell them what type of agency is this? So the first one, sorry, I should have backed up, got ahead of myself a little bit. The first part is two different agents at two different brokerages. So I'm representing a buyer and agent Jane Doe at XYZ Realty is representing the seller. We fill out part one. If I'm representing both the buyer and the seller, so I have dual agency, then we fill out part two. So again, we don't do designated agency. You'll never fill that section out. Instead, you're going to jump down to dual agent. You're going to check this box. You're going to put in both agents' names if there is two agents in the same brokerage. So what I mean by that is I'm representing the buyer. I put in Matt Brown, and Julie Fulkerson's representing the seller. I'm putting in Julie here. So it's same brokerage, two different agents, right? Third part is, sorry, this is where the dual agency comes in. The third part is you're representing buyer and seller. So affiliate agent Matt Brown and the brokerage firm Keller Williams Elite, and then you'll check this box. It will be a dual agent, dual agency explained in the Guide to Agency Relationships that they will represent both parties. Or you could check and say that I'm representing only the buyer or only the seller, and the other party is unrepresented. So there's two different sections here. 99% of the time, you're going to fill out this very top section because you're probably representing both people. Next part of it is part four is transactional. So this is, again, you're only doing the transaction. You're only doing the paperwork. You're not actually representing, and hear me there, like, this is crucial. If you're transactional brokerage, you're not representing. You can't really answer questions. You can't give advice. You can't do all the things that you would normally do for a client because you're literally just filling out paperwork for them. And then you check who all is unrepresented. So in this case, obviously you put your name here, and then the buyer or the seller, one or both, are representing themselves. And then next part, actually, before we go to the next part, let me recap this. So part B, two agents in two different brokerages, you fill out part B. Part one. Part two is two different agents in the same brokerage, and you're going to fill out the dual agency part here. Part three is you're the only agent and you're representing both parties. And then part four is licensing. So you only fill out one of those four parts depending on your relationship with the client and what you're doing inside that transaction. But the other thing is, the next part, separate from that, regardless of what you check in there, is licensee's relationship to other parties in the transaction. If you have personal, family, or business relationship, you have to write it in these lines. So if you're working with a cousin, you write down and you say buyer's agent is cousins with the buyer. If it's a past client, I got this question asked a lot, and I actually directly called the KREC a couple of years ago and asked this. If they're a past client, technically you already have a business relationship. You should really put in here, just again, to protect yourself, you should really put the buyer is a repeat client of agent Matt Brown, something along those lines. But really, you just need to disclose, are you in business with the person, or have you done business with the person before? Are they family member, or do you have a personal relationship? Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's somebody I graduated high school with, so on and so forth. Think sphere of influence, basically, for that section. Most important thing, especially if their family or business, really needs to be disclosed in their personal side. Yeah, you can kind of, debate that. Disclaimer, just says responsibility of all parties. If legal or tax advice, you should consult the appropriate professional. Again, let them know we're the real estate professional, not the all things professional, so they might need to hire some additional help. And then everybody signs, prints, dates, and times this form. So this is the form that I get asked the most questions about because it's part A and part B. One thing I would like to note, and we were working through with compliance on this, you can have two separate forms. Meaning you can fill out part A and upload it into Command during your consult, and then fill out just part B and upload it into Command under contract. As long as both are in there, we'll go and search. It doesn't necessarily have to be all on the same form. Ideally, it would be great if it's the same form just to make it easier. But if you have two separate forms, it's okay. We can work around that. The key is that the client has filled out part A when you first start representing them, and part B when you actually go to write an offer on that one. So any questions on that form before I move on to the last one we're going to go over today? Okay. All right. So last form we're going to go over today. Again, I'll move quickly on this one because you all, most of you who are on this, I think every single one of you have gone over this before, but this is our exclusive buyer agency agreement. This is the latest version that we have. So I wanted to highlight a couple of key differences while we're doing it. As far as filling it out, real simple to fill out. What's the date you're entering the agreement? what's the name of the buyers on the first line, their address, their email address, their phone number. So this is just these first 4 lines. Who's the person that you're representing? The next line is who are you? So this will be where you're going to go. So in my case, I would put Matt Brown here. Then section 1, the purpose of the agency. This is basically letting them know what's it going to be like working with you. How are you going to represent them? You can read through that, and it talks about how you negotiate contracts, how you effectively deal with inquiries, other brokers, things like that. And then we have a place to initial here that says that you have received the guide to agency relationships and the agency consent form, those first 2 forms that I went over. You do need to get those signed first before you get this signed, because they're entering it. By the time you get this signed, they have entered an agreement with you. So you must have those first 2 previous documents signed as well. And then they have to initial saying that they've signed those. The next section 2 is beginning and end date of this relationship, meaning that this relationship, as me representing you as an exclusive buyer agent, shall begin on today. And today is if I'm not mistaken, the 28th of August, 2024. So I'm going to put 28th day of August 2024, and the agreement shall reign into effect. And you can put this date on here, and here's why we changed this. Before, we had a period of 1 year. Well, we're already starting to see, I mean, me personally, I've had some people that say, hey, I'm only entering a 3-month agreement. If we need to extend it, we will. I'm personally going for 6 months agreements. That's kind of what me and my team are doing. Again, you can do a year, do whatever your rainmaker or you as an individual person wants to do, but you'll fill out the date, and it automatically terminates at this date. So you will need to get a new form when that date comes, no matter, if you do a 1 day or if you do a 10-year, it's still going to terminate at the end of that date. Section A talks about termination and how it terminates. So obviously what I just said in terms of termination date set forth. And then didn't mean to scroll there. And then the last section talks about termination by the broker. So you do have the right to terminate the agreement. It's not just the buyer can terminate an agreement. If you decide that person is not a good fit for you, you can terminate it. That termination does need to be in writing. And then we get on to section 3 in regards to compensation. And in here, Part A is the admin fee. So here you're going to put in your admin fee. For teams, you all have a lot of different admin fees. For if you're an individual agent or your team doesn't change the admin fee, it's $225 or $250 depending on where you're at and what brokerage you're part of or what office you're part of. Properties listed with the broker, it says seller will pay a commission as specified on the purchase agreement and in the listing contract upon completion of buying any property. So this is why we want you to put it in the purchase agreement, because this purchase agreement supersedes everything else. So that's why we're asking you to put the line in, seller to pay buyer's broker 3% of the sales price, or whatever percentage that you end up using. Part C covers if the seller is not offering compensation. Again, I hate to even say offering, because we're just going to negotiate in the purchase agreement. But here is where it's going to be, what are you going to get paid? What's the buyer willing to pay you, whether you get it covered or you don't? So in this section, you put in a percentage. So for example, you can put in 3% or a flat fee. If it's a smaller purchase price, sometimes people will just do like a $2,000 flat fee or $3,000 flat fee instead of 3%. If it's like say a $50,000 listing, something along those lines. We did add a couple things in. This has already been here, but I wanted to talk about this before I get to the first part we added in. Broker will attempt to negotiate with the seller to have commission paid for by the seller. Again, that's why we're putting it in the purchase agreement. Here's the new part. Part of the new part. If sellers do not agree, commission will be negotiated by the buyers. So that lets them know that, hey, and here's the thing, y'all, I'm shooting for the highest number of what I'm charged. So I'm going for 3% on all these, and I'm simply telling them that if I can't get it covered, it says right here that the buyer, where'd it go? Oh, right here. If the seller does not agree to pay, commission will be negotiated by the buyer. So that lets them know right then and there, we have the right to renegotiate this number. If the seller's offer buyer broker compensation is less than the agreed buyer broker compensation, the buyer will compensate the broker and the difference in the amount stated in this agreement. This is the new line that we added in. So let's say, for example, they sign this and say, I'm willing to pay you 3%. You start negotiating the purchase agreement on whatever house they're buying and just making up a number again, say the seller's only willing to offer you 1%. This line right here allows you to cover the buyer to cover the difference between the 1% that the seller is willing to offer and the 3% that they're willing to pay you. Of course, again, it says that, again, the very next line, the buyer understands commission is negotiable. So you and the buyer might have to enter another round of negotiations. But ultimately, we wanted to add that in case there is a gap there and you wanted to have the ability to collect that. Or for previous forms, it basically said whatever's in the purchase agreement is what you're getting paid, and tough luck on the gap or the difference there. Let me see, I got a question real quick. Matt, some of us had a question on which listing agreement are we supposed to be using? So there is no law behind which purchase agreement you have to use. We are asking everybody to use the newest purchase agreement. If you're in HCAR, they have HCAR agreements. If you're in GLAR, they have GLAR agreements. If you're in GORA, they have GORA agreements. Use the latest listing agreement that the board has put out. We already have those sent into DocuSign. DocuSign's just a little slow templating things. But again, you can use the old listing agreement. If you use the old listing agreement, it goes back to the further comments or further conditions. You just need to specify what percentage the seller is paying you and what percentage is the seller willing to offer to any buyer's agents. But we do want you to use the newest listing agreement, especially once they get uploaded into DocuSign, which should be any day now. The rest of this form, section 4, is just non-discrimination. Again, fair housing. We went through that previously. Same thing applies here. Section 5 is that basically, if there's a disagreement, we're not jumping straight to court. We're going to attempt to mediate this and arbitrate it. And then if we can't reach an agreement through mediation, then we go to arbitration. If we can't reach an agreement through arbitration, then at that point we go to court. Additional terms, we wanted to add a section should you need to write anything in, any type of contingencies, anything along those lines. And then section 7, this is critical, that we added in no other agreements. So basically, by signing below, the buyers hereby acknowledge the buyer is not currently represented by any other brokerage in Kentucky or Indiana, because that's the states we serve. And then the buyer has to initial here. So we put this in place in hopes that people wouldn't be going around signing 50 buyer's agent agreements with everybody. We want them, because this is an exclusive buyer agency agreement. It means you're working exclusively. They are hiring you exclusively to represent them in a house, not hiring 10 different agents to represent them. So we put that in play in order to hopefully supersede any other previous agreements. And then everybody signs at this point. Now, I do want to note one thing on here, and then I'll open it up for more questions. Authorized agent, principal broker. So inside of here, Kelly's going to sign there. You're the authorized agent, so you're going to sign the bottom part, and then your buyer signed the last 2 lines. So those are all the documents that you need to execute a buyer wants and needs and all of their agreements effectively. Again, it's the Guide to Agency Relationships. It's the agency consent buyer version, because there is a seller version. So make sure you use the buyer version. And then ultimately the exclusive buyer agency agreement. So any questions on any of those documents before we wrap up? Okay. All right, well, go out and make sure all your buyers, again, just a reminder from a legal standpoint, you do have to have all 3 of those documents signed, not just the exclusive buyer agency before you show a home. That is the new law, so please make sure that you're complying with that. If you go to fill any of these forms out, you have any questions, anything along those lines, please let me know. Also, if any of your buyers start to give you pushback on any of these forms, please let me know that. I just want to know what types of conversations you are having so that we can create content in order to be able to help you succeed at the highest level. So appreciate y'all tuning in today, and we're going to be going over listing agreements next week. So I hope to see you all then.